Today's video comes requested from one of my Patreon members over at worldbeaterwrestling.com, and it's all about how to structure your finishes, how to put together a strong home stretch, and what are some factors that play a major part in putting it all together. Stick around. Before you start brainstorming and putting things down on paper, you should probably ask the promoter exactly what they want from the match. They might have a future idea in mind. Perhaps this match leads to something else from a storyline perspective, in which case the finish of the match is usually a great place to build to that. So if you're putting all these ideas down and they don't happen, it's kind of just a waste of time. Get your head around that first. If you're enjoying these videos and want to support me in making bigger and better content just like this, make sure you head over to my worldbeaterwrestling.com Patreon. It's a community for pro wrestlers, current and aspiring, a place of networking, collaboration, and exclusive learning content to help you on your pro wrestling journey. Anyway, back to the video. And the second thing I'll usually ask the promoter or booker is, are there any other special finishes on the card that they're aware of that we need to stay out of the way of? You don't want to have similar finishes on the same card. It's just going to diminish either yours or theirs. So once that's out of the way, what we do have control over is an awareness of our position on the card and the story we're trying to get across in the match. If this is just a standalone match and it's not leading to anything further in the future, then usually your finish is where you're going to pay off whatever story is being told. It's going to get set up during the shine, during the heat, and paid off right at the end. Now let's think about your position or place on the card. If you're not in the bigger matches on the card, let's say the main event and perhaps the match before intermission, which is commonly positioned as the second biggest or semi-main event of the card, then you might not want to spend a great deal of time in that home stretch running through every false finish and every big move in your arsenal. You may be looking at a shorter home stretch. Now the caveat to this is, although you can go straight to a finish, and as a babyface you might get your comeback in, get your finish 1, 2, 3, I feel like the best home stretches generally have a little bit of peak and valley involved. That means if your babyface is going over, if they're going to get their comeback in, you might just have one little moment where the heel gets back on top or cuts them back down. That little valley can lead to a much greater peak right at the finish. Or if the heel's going over, assuming we've just had a heat in the middle of the match, we definitely want the babyface to get a couple of big bombs in, and it doesn't have to be big moves. It could be a flash pin out of nowhere, but we still need those few moments of hope where we think the babyface might get the win. Otherwise, it can really feel like a squash. Remember, pro wrestling's all about drama, and drama's created through presenting obstacles. And if everything is just a linear finish right to the end with no real obstacles in play, I dare say you're not going to get the best response that you could have got from the audience. Now going back to what I said about a flash pin, if you're concerned about time, then obviously hitting massive moves that require a great deal of selling, like top rope suplexes and your big finishes, they're going to soak up a lot of time. So if you go to things like quick pins, like submission attempts, these are things that can be recovered from quite quickly and can keep the pace moving along. Now let's talk about the overall match structure, because although we're talking about finishes today, I feel like that finishing stretch determines the rest of the match. Obviously, if you haven't built to that final stretch correctly or adequately, it's not going to get the same payoff. So let's assume that we're working a 3-act structure. Act 1 is our shine, Act 2 is our heat, and Act 3 is our go-home stretch. If the idea is for the heel to go over at the end, then I probably wouldn't spend a great deal of time in the heat in Act 2, where the heel is generally on top and putting the babyface in peril, and minimize Act 3, where the babyface comes back. Because when you do that, you're not really allowing your babyface to look great. And that's the whole purpose, is we want the crowd to get behind them. We don't want them to lose hope. Now, if for whatever reason you have to run something like that, of course, give your babyface those few real believable moments before the actual finish, and always make sure that your shine is quite strong for the babyface. Maybe give them more time there to establish themselves and show what they're worth. There's an old saying that the biggest shine is a win. So if you are going over, this means you can afford to give your opponent maybe a little more emphasis in other stages of the match. The last thing to think about is that you always want the action to escalate. You don't want to go from big bombs, big false finishes, the crowd on a high, and then once they come down, you go to an anticlimactic finish. Anticlimactic finishes for a heel can work, but you want to make sure what precedes that is appropriate. And what's appropriate is usually going to be periods of action intensity, and excitement. So there's a bunch of things to think about. I can't just give you any one way to do things because it really does depend on context. You have to have a feel for who you are, the promotion you're working for, the crowds you're working for, and what you want to achieve from this match. Play around with certain things, see what works, see what doesn't, and you'll start to get a little bit of a template of what generally works in your home stretches. You know, there really is an art to putting home stretches together. So let me know what you thought. Let me know how you like to do it yourself. Drop it in the comments box below. And of course, if you are here on YouTube, click the like button, click the subscribe button, ring the notification bell so you can stay up to date with my weekly pro wrestling videos. If you want more access to exclusive content, to learning materials, if you want to work with me as your mentor, head to worldbeaterwrestling.com. It's my Patreon page with over 100 different members at the moment, working together to build stronger professional wrestling.